There are prohibitions to serving on a selection committee which must be observed. If a selection committee member is related to an applicant by blood or marriage, no matter how distant the relationship, that member is prohibited from serving on the committee. If a selection committee member has a personal relationship with an applicant, that member is prohibited from serving on the committee. It is important to understand the difference between a personal and professional relationship. If a selection committee member likes a candidate in the department, or occasionally has lunch with the candidate while they are both on campus, or attends the Christmas party and enjoys the company of the candidate, then there is still a professional relationship between them. The only thing that brings the two together is the workplace. It would be impossible to find a committee if knowing and liking an internal candidate prohibited participation on a selection committee. However, if a selection committee member dates a candidate, or calls to ask a candidate to the movies on Sunday afternoon, or engages in recreational activities with the candidate, then there is a personal relationship between them, and the committee member should recuse himself/herself from the committee. All selection committee members should be free from bias for or against all candidates. If a committee member feels that a particular candidate should definitely get a position or should never get a position, then that member should recuse himself/herself from the committee. Letters of recommendation pose another challenge to participation on a selection committee. If a selection committee member writes a letter of recommendation for a candidate for the recruitment to which the member is appointed, then that member will be prohibited from continuing in that recruitment. At the time the member writes the letter, that member is expressing his/her opinion that the candidate is well qualified for the position. That is a stated and signed bias, and the member will not be allowed to continue in the process. However, if the candidate submits a letter written by a committee member for another position, then the letter will be removed from the file and the candidate will be notified of the removal. In some cases, employees of the district have a financial interest in a business or property with others. However, a selection committee member may not have a financial interest with a candidate. This is a conflict of interest as defined by law and prohibits service on a selection committee. These prohibitions are maintained on an honor system. The district relies on individual committee members to act ethically and responsibly in the role of committee member. If the district discovers that the prohibited participation did take place, then the person who violated the district's prohibitions may be prohibited from participating in all selection procedures. If you have questions about any of these situations, please feel free to contact the Human Resources Department for further discussion. If there are no prohibitions to serving as a selection committee member, a person may serve in one of three capacities: as a voting member, as a non-voting member, and as a process monitor. The responsibilities that one assumes in each of these roles are different. A voting member is either appointed by his or her constituent group or is the manager who directly supervises the position for which the recruitment is in process. Section 7 of all the selection procedures contain the composition of the selection committee. Consensus is the preferred committee decision-making process. However, if consensus is not possible, then the decisions will be made by a simple majority vote of voting members. If there is an internal recruitment, the selection committee composition is listed in Section 5 of the procedure. Non-voting members may be recommended by the selection committee at an initial meeting. The non-voting member will be approved by the constituent group if the non-voting member is also a member of a constituent group. If a selection committee recommends an external expert, then that expert will be contacted by Human Resources for participation. The district encourages broad and inclusive participation in the selection process by inviting or recommending non-voting members. All constituent groups are represented on a management selection committee. However, faculty selection committees may recommend non-voting student and/or classified participation, and classified selection committees may recommend non-voting student or faculty participation. Non-voting members may only participate in a limited capacity. Non-voting members may participate in the development of the paper screening tool, the interview questions, and any skills testing, and in the selection of interview dates. Non-voting members will not read applications or participate in the selection of candidates for interview. Non-voting members may participate in the interview process by asking a question or questions during the interview and by providing input concerning the performance of candidates in the interview process. Non-voting members will not score or rate candidates for the selection process record. Every selection committee will have a process monitor. If a voting selection committee member appointed by a constituent group or by the selection procedure has completed process monitor training, then that member may act as both voting member and process monitor. If none of the voting selection committee members appointed by the constituent groups has completed process monitor training, then Human Resources will work with the supervisor of the position to ensure that a process monitor is available for the selection committee. A process monitor will be appointed to attend all the meetings of the committee and to monitor committee activities to ensure that they are performed according to district procedure and do not violate federal or state law or district procedures. In no case may the appointment of a process monitor add a vote to the composition of voting members on the selection committee specified in Section 7. In faculty and management selection processes, the voting members of the selection committee will elect a committee chair by vote. In classified and confidential selection processes, the dean or area manager will act as the selection committee chair. In a part-time faculty process, the dean will be the chair and chair duties may be shared with faculty. The selection committee chair will lead committee discussions. The chair will also lead the interview process by greeting each candidate and facilitating introductions. The chair is responsible for communicating committee information on the development of the paper screening tool and interview questions, changes to the spreadsheet for selecting candidates, candidates selected for interview, and interview schedules. The chair may share some of these duties with the process monitor so that information flows quickly and effectively to Human Resources. In management and faculty selection processes, the committee chair will go forward with the finalist candidates to the finalist interview process. The selection committee chair will present the committee's assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of each of the finalist candidates to the president superintendent. Ensuring that accurate and complete information is delivered is one of the most important functions of the chair.